We had a boy in the home that had stopped breathing when I was caring for him. He was in a bed asleep. I had no idea how long he had not breathed. When I picked him up, he was not breathing. And then I picked him up and he started breathing. So when it came to adopt him, we told the adoptive family he had stopped breathing. It ended up that he was adopted here in the United States where we are.
Yeah.
And our son, Brad, was hospitalized and he died a few days later. But the nurse who was taking care on duty of our son that night was that young man, which was a baby boy in Taiwan that had stopped breathing.
He was the one that my wife picked up and wasn't breathing.
Wow, wow,
And-
wow. That's amazing. It's really the full circle. You help someone and they helps your family. Totally unrelated.
Yes, it's
Wow.
Hello, listeners. My guests today are Ted and Bev Skiles, Christian missionaries that left their hometown of Missouri, USA in 1968. They packed up their whole life with almost nothing to their name, and they went with their 3 children on a boat for 17 days to the opposite side of the world. Little did they know they would spend over the next 50 years in Taiwan as missionaries. They ended up running an orphanage there that held over 3,000 children, and they successfully adopted out over 500 children to homes all around the world. We talk about children being stolen and sold for money in Taiwan. We talk about a child they adopted that grew up to help their dying son. We also talk about the complexities of social work, as well as much, much more. This is Mastered. Please welcome Ted and Bev Skiles.
So, Ted and Bev, can you just share a little bit about yourselves and what you've been up to today?
Well, I will begin.
Yeah, sure.
Bev and I grew up in the town of Eldon, Missouri, which is near Jefferson City, the capital of the state of Missouri.
Sure.
And she was in the 8th grade and I was in the 9th grade, just starting high school when we first met.
Yeah.
And we were friends in high school, but I was kind of interested in her, but she was engaged when she was 16 years old to another man.
Wow.
And I was kind of surprised at that and disappointed, and they
Yeah.
broke up, and I was sad about that. And and later on, when I asked her to marry me, she said, "If you're the last man on earth, I wouldn't marry you."
I guess I got desperate.
But at 18 years of
Oh.
age, she got desperate. So anyway,
Yeah.
we married on June the 29th, 1963.
Yeah.
So we've been married for 60 years now.
Wow.
And we have 7 children.
Yeah.
And 11 grandchildren
Mm-hmm.
and 15 great grandchildren.
Wow.
Or is it the other way around? We have 15 grandchildren and 11 great grandchildren.
Yeah. Wow.
I'd like to say we've been married for 60 years, but I think we'll have it all together around 100 years.
Yeah.
I can imagine. I could definitely imagine.
Every once in a while, we still run into problems, but that's
Mm.
okay.
That's amazing, though. It's a testament to you guys and all the work you've done.
Both
Yeah.
both of us came from broken homes,
Okay.
and our agreement had been that we would stick it out together no matter what.
Okay.
And so sometimes it's been what, but we've managed to stay together
With God's
That's
help.
amazing.
with God's help.
With God's help.
And
That's amazing.
when we got to Taiwan, we arrived, we went by ship the first time. We left on December the 28th,
Yeah.
1968, and it took us 17 days to
Yep.
get there. We arrived on January the 14th, 1969. And the first thing we're faced with were all of these people talking a different language that we didn't understand. And
Yeah.
we looked at each other and said, this is not going to be easy.
Yeah.
But anyway, we started
Mm.
language study.
Mhm.
And we studied our first term basically in the Chinese language, the Mandarin language, because that is the national language of Taiwan, even though Taiwanese is spoken very fluently, especially by the older people there.
Yeah.
But Mandarin is the national language.
Yeah.
And during the course of that time, while we were in language study, one of the things we did was to teach English using an English Bible class and having students come to our home.
Mhm.
And we had two young men who were from the town of Luodong, which is on the eastern coast of
Yeah.
Taiwan. And they invited us to their home in 1971
Yeah.
for Chinese New Year. And at that time, to take a train from Taipei to Luodong, we had to take what's called the fast train, but it was everything but
Mhm.
fast. And it stopped in every place to let people off. And it took us almost 4 hours, and we were crammed in there standing up, and we had to put our luggage in and the kids in and try to find them. But eventually we got there, and they put us in their home up next to where they worship the idols, and they would drop the prayer lips, and we would hear that, and it was difficult for us being Christians to hear them appealing to the gods. So when we got ready to leave, we took a Bible and handed it to the man of the house, Mr. Yang, and we said, "We can see you're a very religious people. We'd like to leave you this Bible to teach you about Jesus and God's love for you, and we hope you'll read it." The next year, they invited us to come back in 1972 for Chinese New Year, and they had invited us to move to Luodong. And Bev said, "Why don't we pray that if God wants us to go move to Luodong, that he would move the heart of Mr. Yang to ask us to come and teach him about Jesus. The Bible you gave me last year, I've read 7 times. Could you come and teach me about Jesus?"
Wow.
Well, we looked at each other and we said, "I guess we know where we're moving."
Yeah.
But and his son wrote to the government and asked what they needed, and they said they needed a mental institution and a children's home.
Right.
Well, Bev and I felt qualified to live in the mental institution, just not to operate it.
Sometimes I feel like that too.
But having grown up in broken homes, we felt that maybe we could help children. And we had read 3 books. One was by Hudson Taylor, one was by Jonathan Goforth, and one was by George Mueller. And all 3 of those men worked with the Chinese or with people, and they would not ask people for money. They would just pray about what they needed.
Yes.
So we had determined that if God wanted us to open a home for children, that's the way we would operate. We've never asked people for money, and we still do not request money today. We just pray about what we need. And to this very day, no matter what we've had expenses, God has provided for us in very marvelous ways.
Yeah.
So we've appreciated that, and everything is paid for, and that's how we still operate with the Home of God's Love. Through the years, we've had about 2,200 different children that have gone through the home, and have processed about 500 adoptions. When we began the adoption process, the government asked us to send the children out of the country because they thought the population was too great.
And they changed that.
Now they've changed, Yeah, they've
Yeah.
changed now.
Yeah.
They say the younger people are not having children, so we'd like for you to keep the children within the country.
Yeah. This is some of the
So
questions I
we
was
have,
going to ask you about because I've got some points about this I want to ask
yeah.
you later. Yeah. Yeah.
And so to this point,
Mm.
God has provided good Christian homes for the children in Taiwan.
Hmm.
And so we're very thankful for that
Yeah. Yeah.
and have been able to do those adoptions now within the country.
Hmm. Okay.
I
Well,
don't
look,
know if my wife wants to add anything to that or not, but
is there anything you
Well,
want to
I
add?
do.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Number one, as a young person, we had a next door neighbor who could have no children. And I spent a lot of time at
Mm.
their house. And I
Mm.
always said, when I grow up, I want to have babies for all those people in the world who cannot have babies.
Oh,
That
so
will fit
nice.
into our story later.
Yeah.
And I decided that I wanted to be an old maid missionary and go to Japan and have a children's home. I did
What?
not become an old maid missionary, since that means someone that's not married. I did marry. And I did go, we made plans to go to Japan first, but we started studying Japanese.
Uh-huh.
And somehow it wasn't the right move for us. For number
Yeah.
one, we're kind of loud, noisy people. And we ended up having a lot of kids. And so we wouldn't have fit into Japanese society
Yeah.
all that well. So God did that.
Yeah.
We ended up in Taiwan.
Okay.
And when we first we went going to study Mandarin because we planned to go to mainland China to
Mm.
help start churches. And then mainland China was closed, and it really never opened until, probably 15 years ago. I can't
Yeah.
say for sure.
Yeah.
But then God did get us to Asia, and He planted us in Taiwan.
Yeah. Good. Good. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing both of you, Bev and Ted, about your story and like a good overview about how everything sort of started. Can I ask, personally, if it's okay, can you share a little bit about your own stories about, firstly, how a little bit about your home life, and then also about religion and how that ties into first kind of wanting to be a missionary overseas?
Well, for me, I
Yeah.
had two parents, but my father worked away from home,
Okay.
and he was like a sailor. He was like a girl in every port. So
Yeah.
I had a wonderful mother,
Yeah.
and but she was a Christian, but she never went to church. And I had people who took an interest to me. They took me to church and
Yeah.
spent time with me, invested in me.
Yeah.
And then as a young person, we were both Ted and I were involved in the same youth group, but we
Okay.
we had made a personal, individual decision that wherever God wanted us to go, we would go. So
Hmm.
that helped in our matching.
Hmm.
That we had a similar commitment. We had God was the same, and He's
Yeah.
always the same in our lives.
Yeah.
And then as we were growing up, and we had a strong biblical background, and
Yeah.
then in Bible college, we're just you're hearing lots of challenges,
Hmm.
and then Ted can tell us more about that.
well, when my father was in World War II
Yes.
and was very committed to my mother, but during the war, he killed people. He had been raised on a farm and had always been taught that killing animals for the meat was acceptable, but he had never killed people.
Yeah.
And coming back from the war, he had been changed and
Mm.
started drinking heavily, and that affected, of course, our whole family.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And my parents divorced,
Mm.
and I was about 10 years old when they divorced. And about 12 years of age, my mother took us from Missouri to the state of California. And California was wild living. I had been on a farm, and I knew what it took to have baby cows and baby pigs. It took a male and a female. But in California, they laughed at me because they talked about sex as though it were something dirty
Uh-huh.
instead of a God-given gift.
Uh-huh.
And so at my request, my mother let me go back and lived with my dad's parents on the farm in Missouri.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
I really appreciated that because my grandparents were strong Christians, and they always took me to church services
Mhm.
every Lord's Day. And as Bev told you, then eventually we were in the same youth group
Yeah.
and grew up having that same focus
Got it.
on doing whatever God wanted us to do.
So you two met in a youth group in Missouri, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so then how did, I know that you both kind of had a passion and knew that you wanted to help people in your own regard, and then you found later a shared connection with that. What my question is, how did you hear about Taiwan and then want to get involved in a mission with that?
We had, when we got to Ozark Christian College in Joplin, Missouri, we had friends there. Janet Bemo was a student in the college, and her parents had been missionaries to China,
Okay.
Hunan, China, in the Yunnan province.
Yep.
In fact, her father died there in the Yunnan province and was buried in the Yunnan province.
Really?
And her mother stayed with her until the Japanese came during World War II.
Okay.
And they escaped on the back of an elephant over the Burma Hump and went to India.
Wow.
And from India, they went to Japan, where
so they went,
Mrs. Dittmore's brother.
So they went west.
Where
They went west. They're in Hunan, and they went west all the way to India. Okay.
Yeah, and then they went to Japan after World War II because her brother had been a chaplain in the army for America, and he wanted to go to Japan and help them after the devastation of Hiroshima and the bombing that had taken place. So she and Janet went to Japan.
Gotcha.
In fact, when our friend Alan Bemo married Janet, he said, "I thought I was marrying an American, but I actually was marrying a Japanese." Because that's where she grew up.
Okay.
But during that time, Mrs. Dittmore was invited to come down to Taiwan. It would be of old China hands that she had met in China years before. So she went, and then her daughter Janet and her husband Alan came to work for a year, and Bev and I, in turn, were their forwarding agents in America, helping to take care of their business in America. And during that time, they kept asking us, would we be interested in coming
to Japan?
Would we be interested in coming to Taiwan?
To Taiwan. So sorry, I thought they were in Japan. How did they get to Taiwan?
No, Mrs. Dittmore then went to Taiwan, and that's when Alan and Janet came to work with her for a year in Taiwan.
So even though she had been in Taiwan, she had first been in Tibet.
Okay.
And then the communists. And so she went to Japan as a next place, and she loved Japan. But then she always had a heart for China.
Okay.
And at that time, China was closed. So you figured Taiwan was Chinese speaking.
Yes.
You're getting back to the type of people that you started out with.
Yes.
And so that's how, when she got that invitation, she was excited to come to Taiwan.
Okay, can I just clarify the story? So she was in China. Sorry, her father was in China. And then they fled.
Her mother and father were in China.
Yeah, they were in Hunan, and then they fled to India, and then later settled in Japan, and then they were back in Tibet doing missionary work. Is that right?
No. When she was in Japan and escaping from the Japanese.
Oh, during the war. This is pre World War II.
Correct.
Okay, now it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
To Tibet, then to India, and then to Japan.
Okay, so this would have been like around the time of Nanjing, the Battle of Nanjing, or the rape in Nanjing, that time period, prior to World War II.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the late 30s,
yes,
and early.
Yeah.
And then when World War II broke out, there she met her husband, Warren Dittemore.
Mhm.
And they married. And during the war, they had a little boy named Johnny. Well, when it looked like the war was about over, they moved to California to get ready to go back to China. And their little boy, Johnny, died of what's called crib death today.
Yeah.
And so that left them with their daughter, Janet.
Okay.
And then Mr. Dittemore, the armistice had already been signed, but it was still dangerous to travel by ship. So he went ahead in a blackened out ship because the Japanese, some of them had not gotten the message and they were still plying the ocean.
There's still Japanese that was still fighting 20 years after the war.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
So but they were only together for about 6 months.
Yeah.
Because while Warren was in India, his passport and yellow book were stolen, and the government reissued his passport.
Yeah.
But the medical profession would not believe that he had had all of those shots. So he was required to take the shots over again.
Oh my goodness.
Well, in those days, they used live virus, not like we do today. And so when they got together in the Yunnan province, Warren came down with typhoid fever.
Yeah.
And after that, after he passed away, Mrs. Dittemore said doctors told her that probably he had too much of the serum in his body, and it actually gave him the disease rather than protecting him from the disease. Yeah.
So he had trained to be a doctor. He trained to be a veterinarian. He was gung-ho about being a missionary, and he did the studying and all those things. And then he's only on the mission field for 6 months before he dies of typhoid fever.
So what did he need the yellow book for?
The yellow book was every time you had a shot, it was entered in this book. So you couldn't go through any country borders at that time without a yellow book.
Okay. So you couldn't do anything without it.
Now, a very important document then, but nothing. Even for orphanage now, we'll have in some of our American adoptions, we have to go by the American inoculation requirements.
Yeah.
Some medical people don't believe it because China's been known to fabricate those shots. They're not. So then they'll have to give those shots again. This is a current situation in the United States when they just don't believe those shots were given. Now there is a blood test you can take to see if you've had the shots.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So people have duplicated those shots that were already given in Taiwan before they left the country.
Okay.
So it's a very troublesome thing. And even like in the United States, before you go to school, before you go to college, you have to make sure you have all your inoculations in order.
It's the same in Australia.
They don't let you on a couple campus. Yes.
Yeah.
Very important thing.
Yeah.
And when we went to Taiwan, we had to carry yellow books to prove of all the shots that we had had. And then, like cholera,
it's the size of a passport. Yeah.
It's the same size as a passport, but I could go get you a copy and show it to you. But it's just a yellow book with all of your shots listed in it.
So just to rewind the story, so this woman and this man were married, had a child, and then they met in separate locations. Is that right?
They met at a missionary convention.
Okay, they met previously, and they'd gone, and they were in different locations. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then why was he in Hunan, and why was she in Tibet, or was Tibet later?
No, she had come over to the Yunnan province earlier with the family that she was working with called the Morris family. And but he was never in the Yunnan province.
Okay.
Until after they married in America and after World War II. Then
so they came back. They came back to America. Okay. Yeah. Then they're married.
And actually,
Yeah.
Actually, she was in Tibet as a single woman. God seemed to convince her at a very young age, maybe 5 or 6, to be a missionary. So she trained in that way, and she went out as a single person to Tibet. Then came back with the missionary convention, met her husband, and then that's how these other things
Okay.
unfold.
So she had a history in Asia, whereas her partner had not. He's always grown up in America. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So she
right. He's never been in.
So she'd known about Japan, India, China, and Taiwan. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So that makes more sense now.
And
Yeah.
then her daughter
Yeah.
and her daughter's husband,
Yes.
Alan and Janet Demo, came to Taiwan
Yes.
to work with her for a year.
The wife
The wife is the daughter.
Okay. So the daughter is your friend, or like your connection to that, and their parents are the one. The father passed away, unfortunately, with the yellow book and the vaccines, and then the mother was already there. Is that right? Okay, I'm getting the picture now. Okay, it's starting to make sense now. Okay.
Yeah, the daughter and her husband. There's a great need in Taiwan. Would you be interested in coming?
Why did she say that?
Because at that time, Taiwan was, what is the word? Somewhat backward, undeveloped.
Okay.
And
primitive.
Primitive in many areas. And there was help that was needed in many ways. Yeah. So we considered that. But then in 1968, Mrs. Dittemore came back on furlough. I was excited about it, but Bev wasn't particularly, because that was the first time we had a settled home after college.
Have you had kids? Did you have kids?
3.
That's 3 kids.
3 small children.
Okay. Yeah, 3 small children. Yeah. And so she said she would pray with me about it, and we began to pray. And about 3 months later, she said, like Ruth in the Bible, where you go, I will go. And if you believe that's what God wants us to do, I'll go with you.
Wow.
So we handed in our resignation in July. We moved back to Joplin to get ready. Yeah. And again, we didn't ask people for money. Yeah. We just prayed. Yeah. And when we got ready to leave Mrs. Dittemore came to visit us. That's the mother in Joplin, Missouri in August. And she said, I'm going down to the travel agent to get my tickets to go back to Taiwan. How about you coming with me and seeing what it would cost for you, your wife, and 3 children to go? Well, I said, Mrs. Dittemore, I don't even have a penny to put in a parking meter. How could I possibly get tickets to go back to go to Taiwan? Well, when she finished, she asked the travel agent, how much would it cost for this young man and his wife and their 3 children to be in Taiwan by the end of this year? I said, Mrs. Dittemore. And she said, it doesn't hurt to ask. So the travel agent said, well, the cheapest way to go would be by ship. And the last ship to leave is December the 28th, 1968. And for the 5 of them, it would cost $1,176
for them money to back go. Then. Can't imagine how much it is now.
Yes.
Wow.
And I said, oh, well, Mrs. Dittemore was delighted, and I thought she was demented. But anyway, we went home to pray about it. And 2 days later, the phone rang.
They said you had to have this much money as a down payment.
And it said you had, now the travel agent said you would have to have $376 as a down payment. Well, we received a telephone call from a family in the church that we just left in Blackwell, Oklahoma. And they said our son and daughter-in-law came up from Oklahoma City. and they heard you're going to Taiwan, and they've written you a check for $400.
Wow.
Whoa. Okay, so the check arrived and I cashed it, and that left $24. And the travel agent said, when I went in, she said, I forgot to tell you about passports. You would need at least 2 passports, one for you and one for your wife and 3 children in case you get separated. And each passport at that time was $12. That was exactly 24 more dollars. So there went the $400 right there.
Wow.
So we thought, okay, this is God's will. So
Yeah.
we started preparing, and we were on that ship, and people said, you do not have enough money. And I said, well, God told us to go. He didn't say we had to come back. And
Yeah.
Some people think that's why we stayed 55 years. But anyway,
Wow.
God led us there and
Yeah.
provided for us. We're so thankful for that, so grateful that we've had that opportunity to serve. And He gave us a place to help children that needed help through the years.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that. I'll come back to that. I just wanted to ask you as well, just going back to the Dinamo family. Is that how I say it? Yeah.
Right.
Going back to them. So I'm still just curious about how Christianity and missionaries like all link into this. Yeah. So this is my question about this. Yeah. So she had this history of going out throughout Asia, and then also a connection back to the States, and then that's how they met, right? But my question is, like, with her knowledge of Taiwan, is this because she'd been like in Hunan and been at that time, like when she was like a little child, or with the mother after her partner passed away, that after the Chinese Civil War happened, then they had to leave to Taiwan? Is that how she gets to Taiwan? I just want to know how the missionary spreads from there to Taiwan.
While she was in Japan with her daughter, Janet, she had she had Chinese friends who had escaped from mainland China and gone to Taiwan. So when Janet came to America to study in college, Mrs. Dittamore went from Japan to Taiwan to visit her Chinese friends.
Okay.
And they asked her to stay in Taiwan.
So she was living in Japan.
So then she left Japan and moved to Taiwan to work among the Chinese people again. That she had started.
Yes.
And of course, there had been a lot of missionary activity there. Taiwan is still a very free nation. Even in those early years, we've never suffered persecution like in mainland China or anything like that. There, it's strongly Buddhist, and it was our hope and goal that these people could know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. That's the whole point.
Understood. Okay, that makes sense now. All right, so basically, she was in Japan, and then she had friends that had fled from China to Taiwan because that's all they could kind of do. They were escaping persecution. And then, like, Tibet was also an area that was closed. Yeah, okay, got it. All right, and let's just rewind just a little bit further about the history of missionary and Christianity in Asia. So essentially, is it just like the spread of Christianity to go to places where people are unfamiliar with concept of Jesus and Judeo-Christian morals, and like that's just is that how it works in those communities where it's like, hey, I know that like India or I don't know Tonga or Samoa or any of these places aren't familiar with Christianity. Do you is that how it spreads and discusses?
It is. Right, and even in mainland China, that years before mainland China, they always talked about every morning they would have an English lesson in villages. and it would be spread out through a microphone, through big speakers in the villages. And then China closed.
Yeah.
But they'd already had a big influence from those earlier years.
Yeah.
And even though it closed, so even when China had closed, now until just recently, your fastest growing nation of people receiving Christ was China.
Really?
Now those doors are closed again.
Oh, yeah.
And so
all
you have those people that heard before that are standing up in spite of persecution.
Yes.
And the underground church is still moving. So as a Christian, it's our goal to pass on the love of Jesus and who God is. So that's our underlying heartfelt
I get
passion.
absolutely how these stories, like how America and then Asia like links up. That's the thing that people want to kind of hear to piece the narrative together. So it sounds like to me, like from what I'm hearing, is that there's a shared mission to spread the word of Jesus Christ, and then that you're in this place where you're all talking about things that you can do to help, and then someone's like, well, I lived here, or I heard about this, and they go over and they get to see, and then they come back and report, and then they say we need resources and allocations to spread more Christianity. Is that right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I understand understand how this kind of starts now. Okay.
It might be good to think of it as a relay race.
A relay race, yeah. I think that's a good analogy.
And you pass the baton.
Yeah.
And you have to pass the baton on.
Got it.
And you pass the baton.
Got it.
So,
Got it. That's a good analogy, isn't it? It's really just passing it on. That's how things spread, and that's how people get to learn about something. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Okay, so thank you so much for sharing all that. So going back to your journey now, can you just piece together for me, what was it like after hearing that, there's an offer you can go to Taiwan, and then going down and getting the money, which was amazing, and then having just enough to get on the boat and to get the passports? What was it like going on the boat, and what were you feeling coming into onto this big journey? Were you scared, worried? What were you feeling, and what were you sort of seeing on your journey?
Well, for me, I cannot swim.
Oh,
so I said to my brother before we left, I said, I can't believe I'm going to go on a big ship for 17 days and I can't even swim.
Yeah.
And my brother said, sis, people fly in airplanes and they can't fly, so it's no problem. He was being very, very comforting. But I don't like water. I'm not big on water. So it was a big leap of faith for me. But as in all of our married life, in all of our lives, we knew that God was directing our every step. And even though you had a lot of negative things along the way, you still sense that God is going to use these negative things. So when we made this decision to go to Taiwan, I feel that it's very important for a wife to have the same calling as the husband. I think if the wife is only following the husband, I think she's going to be lacking what she's going to need in some serious times.
Okay.
So we had made our commitment, and we had 3 small children, and it was a big deal on the ship.
Absolutely. What was the ship like?
I had these grand ideas of all the things I could do on the ship, but you still have 3 kids.
Yeah.
And we had 1 nurse lady, and we had cheap accommodations. We're not on the water.
Yeah.
We're inside the ship, but we're pretty low.
Yeah.
You're in economy class. So we had these beds that were like 2.5 feet wide, and I had a 10-month-old baby. So the 10-month-old baby is sleeping with me with no sides on the bed, and the ship is screaming. It was very exciting.
Oh, wow.
And then I've always had trouble with motion sickness. And so we go up to our first meal. Well, actually, the night that we boarded the ship, we had people helping us from a church in California board the ship, and so they're having these calls, last call. If you're on the ship, you better leave because the ship is pulling away from the harbor. Ted said, I'll see you in Hawaii, because they were our thing. So I thought we did end up on the same ship at the same time before the door was closed.
Yeah.
But it did give you a bit of nervousness.
Huge trip.
Yes.
Yeah. 12 days.
And we could have gone by airplanes. There were airplanes then, but we could take over to hold luggage very cheaply. So at that time, they didn't have stoves in Taiwan. They didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have washing machines.
Wow.
So we took that type of thing. So it was the
Wow.
best move for us.
That is. And then, what was it like when you turned up? Like, could you speak Chinese?
No, we met a lady.
Okay.
We met a lady on the ship
Yeah.
who was Cantonese,
Okay.
and she taught us how to say thank you and how to say where's the bathroom.
Okay. Good.
But
Important things to know.
but they have
Yeah.
they have a saying. They have a saying in Mandarin. 我不怕天，我不怕地，我就怕广东人说国语. I don't fear heaven and I don't fear hell. I just fear the way a Cantonese speaks Mandarin.
Which means it's not the same at all.
Okay.
Not understanding.
Okay. So that would add to more confusion. They're like, why are you speaking this language? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I got it.
Yeah.
Mm. All right. So, okay, you turn up, and then what do you do then? Like, how do you communicate? How do you get your bearings? Like, see, like for someone like now, like I go to a country, like I met you in Taiwan. Like
Taiwan.
I was using Google Maps and driving around, and I can use Translate. Like I'm fine, but I can't imagine, landing in a foreign country on the other side of the world and not knowing how to speak anything and being like, all right, here's our life now. Let's begin. Where did you land? Sorry, where did you land in Taiwan?
In Geelong, Taiwan, which is in the north,
Yeah.
above Taipei.
Yes.
So then these folks, which is the daughter and her husband,
Mhm.
and the mother, they helped us get settled.
Okay. But where did you live? Were you living, like, did you have your own house that you rented, or?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
We did. Yeah, we even had grass. God is just so terrific because China and Taiwan, they are cement. Everything is cement.
Oh yeah.
At Troco Village, you're seeing a lot of grass.
Yeah.
But as a whole, if you're in your cities and probably even where you are, there's a lot of cement. You have parks, but people's homes are surrounded by cement.
Yeah.
But we're Missouri, old country folks, and God gave us a house with grass. It was just terrific.
Well,
God is just way beyond.
I was going to say, when I was traveling there, I was in Hualien, which is on like the east coast. That's where we met,
Sure.
and I travel on the coastline, and the roads are amazing. Just like brand new roads, you could eat off the roads; they're that clean.
We should have seen them before.
Oh, I can imagine there would have been, like you said, one dirt road. Just have fun, But then, like, I went on the coastline, then I traveled in west. And then there's farmland, and the farmland's just beautiful, just endless, like rows of fields of like corn and rice and whatnot, and then just these giant mountains. So I can see, for you guys being from a country area coming over there, that you can easily have like a farm life type. And then, did your other missionaries live close to you?
Yeah, about 15 minutes,
Okay.
or 20 minutes away.
Well, this is just tying back into everything, Bev, you supported Ted to do that, and then you also have this connection with all the other people that are around your age to help you settle in and also learn the language and also support each other through, I'm assuming there was a number of tough times with a variety of different problems. But, okay, let's just rewind for a moment. Back to what you're saying. So you came, you settled, you got a place, and then what did you start? Like, what was your first line of work? Like, what were you kind of trying to achieve in your first sort of few weeks, months, years?
I think that's probably one of the most discouraging times because language study does not seem to be like you're doing anything.
Okay.
It seems like you're kind of spinning your wheels,
Yeah, okay.
so to speak.
Yeah.
But I would encourage anyone wanting to go to a foreign country as a missionary to never look down on that time spent learning the language, because later
So crucial.
will prove to be invaluable.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say later on we're going to talk a bit more about like your connection with like red tape, bureaucracy, and whatnot. I'm assuming that if you didn't have excellent command of the language, it's going to really pull you back a lot in what you're trying to achieve.
Right, be difficult.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did to sort of keep our sanity, although some people might question whether we kept it or not. um,
Yeah.
they was to have English Bible classes in our home.
Okay.
We always used the English Bible as our textbook, but we taught the English language
That's clever.
to our students
That's clever.
at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time, you didn't have kids studying English. We had a lot of medical doctors that came to these classes because their textbooks were all in English. So English was very important to them. And you had high school, maybe juniors or seniors are studying English. Now people start studying English in Taiwan practically at 3 years old.
Yeah, young age, yeah. So
the whole spectrum. But at that time, it was just your older high school kids, college age, or business people who really needed English, and it was already well aware in the world that English was a very, very important language.
So were you essentially English teachers? Is that what you were doing as like your first sort of call of like work?
But that's volunteer. There's no pay or anything for that. It's simply a volunteer.
That's the first thing you did. You were volunteering English speaking, but also was
what we have.
Through the Bible, using the Bible as a point of reference to explain stories, words, concepts. And then you're having people all around Taiwan come, all around the county or area you're in, all around to come and to learn English. Is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, definitely. So you two were just working and teaching English, volunteering to teach English. And then from there, how did you go into the orphanage? How did the orphanage begin?
Well, then I told you about Mr. Yang inviting us to move to Luodong and teach him about Jesus.
Yes.
And his son writing to the government and asking what they needed. So at that point, we thought we could do the children's work if that was the Lord's leading in our lives. And a doctor and his brother offered to give us the land free of charge if we would come and place a building there and take children.
Okay. So
the first section of land was given as a gift from this man. And later it was his nephew, who was one of our Christians in the church there in Luodong. So it's very interesting how the Lord works. But he gave us that land and we began to build. And the builder came to us and I said, well, Mr. Yo, his name was Yo Dongyang, we do not have all the money that we need to build this kind of structure, but we will pray about what we need. And so he agreed to take it on that basis. And one day he came to us and he said, I had another workplace on the East Coast down in Suao, down going toward Hualien.
Yeah.
And he said, I had a man on a Tuituji, which is a bulldozer.
Yeah.
And he got off the bulldozer, but he didn't secure the shoshacha, the handbrake securely. And the bulldozer went over the cliff.
Whoa.
And he said, I need the equivalent. At that time, it was equivalent of $2,500 right away. And that was sure one. And I said, Mr. Yo, I don't have it, but we will pray about it. And my wife was getting ready to leave for a ladies' retreat. And I said, honey, be sure and have the ladies pray about this need. And that night, after I got the children in bed, the phone rang, and it was from friends of ours in Oregon, in America. And they said, we've had our house up for sale for a long time, and we just realized the sale of that house today. And we wanted to give an offering of $2,500 if you need it. And I said, well, let me tell you what the need is. And so he sent the check
Mm.
to our forwarding agent
Yeah.
in America.
Yeah.
Well, at that time, we did not have all of the digital
Yeah.
things that we have now.
Yeah.
It took 10 days for a check to get back from Taiwan
Wow.
to America.
Wow.
Took 10 days. So I went to the bank the next day. The Bank of America would cash my check. I went to the bank the next day and came back with the $2,500.
But how does that
On
help
our
you?
building.
How does it help with your building, with what you're trying to build?
Well, that was actually to pay for what was needed to be paid on our building at that
Okay.
point. But
Okay.
we had not paid it
Okay.
because we didn't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
And then when he gave us that ultimatum that we needed to have it right away, well, then we started praying specifically about that
Yeah.
need.
Yeah.
And that's how the Lord provided
Okay.
for us.
Okay. And so, just to go back again, so with the person that you gave the Bible to, right? That read
Yes.
it and was like really interested in it, and then came and approached you. So, how did you know him? Was he just someone you taught English to originally?
No, his two children, his two sons,
Yeah.
were in Taipei at the time,
Yes.
going to school, and they wanted to have the language. They were in college,
Yeah.
and they wanted to study the English, so they studied in our home.
Okay. So they
invited.
Okay. His children studied with you.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how we first met him.
Okay. Okay. And then how did he give you the land? Sorry, I just missed that part. How did he
No,
decide?
he did not give us the land, but he was a friend with the doctors who gave us the land. The doctor and his brother
Were they Taiwanese?
actually owned that. Yes, they were Taiwanese.
Okay.
And they actually owned that piece of land out in Meihuahu,
Okay.
the lake. What is that called in English? The Meihuahu, Plum Blossom Lake.
Okay.
It's called in English, Plum Blossom Lake.
So they had some land that they owned, and then they were just motivated to give it.
Yes, because both of them had been the Xinjiangs. Both of them had been mayors of that county. The doctor and his brother
Yeah.
had both been mayors, and they wanted to help the county, and the county needed a children's home
Okay.
to help children
Yeah.
who were like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Sometimes the father was drinking and ran off,
Yeah.
or the mother died and the father couldn't take care of the children,
Yeah.
or different reasons
Yeah.
that children came to our home. And
Exactly.
sometimes both parents were dead
Mm.
and the grandparents couldn't care for the
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
Just a lot of different reasons.
Okay, so this doctor was connected politically to someone that was like a mayor, and then there's a need in the town for an orphanage.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
got it. So then they provided the land and said, "Can you
Yeah.
come to do this?" And then during that process, you needed money to build it, and then there was some issue where the person that was building it had an accident, and they needed that money initially so they could build it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
And
Got it.
and there were many such incidents as that. I could share
Yeah.
lots of stories.
Mm-hmm.
But one time, after we actually had gotten moved into the original building,
Yeah.
we did not have any water supply. We were the last people on the line for the city water. And the Chinese at that time, if they were building, they would let water run over the bricks during the day because the sun was so hot.
Yeah.
And so it took all of the shuiya, all of the water pressure.
Yeah.
It took all of the water pressure. So we couldn't get anything until like 3 a.m. in the morning. And my wife would get up at 3 a.m. to do a load of wash in the washing machine. And so we began to pray about that and ask God, what could be done. Well, a group of factory workers came from the west side in Jiayi, and they offered to give us equivalent of 5,000 US dollars.
Mhm.
Well, 2 days later, a man knocked on the door and he said he was a well driller.
Yeah.
And I said, well, our neighbors tell us there's no water level here. He said, oh, I don't believe that. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll start drilling, and if I don't strike water, you just pay half the distance I go down. Well, he struck water at 76 or 78 feet, and he drilled to 110 feet. And he sunk the well, and we put up the well house, and all of that money that had been given paid exactly what it cost
Wow.
for that water supply. And even today, that water supplies all of the water for both buildings and the new building as well.
Mhm.
And we learned something else. If you go below 100 feet in Taiwan, in that area, you did not have to boil your water. And he drilled to 110 feet.
Oh.
And so we had very pure water. And even to this day, we can drink right out of our faucet.
That's helpful. That's super helpful when you have to, deal with that with water in Asia. Yeah, that's huge. Okay. So how long did it take to build?
Well, the first building, our family moved into an unfinished building on December the 10th, 1974.
Mm.
But the other part of the building was not completed yet until we took our first child on June the 13th, 1975. And within 6 weeks, we had 18 children, I think it was. That's how many came.
18 children
right away.
straight away.
Yeah,
Wow.
to start out with.
And then like you're doing everything for them. You're housing them, feeding them, teaching them,
feeding them. Yes.
everything. Wow.
Yes. And then we were able to hire a lady to help us live in the home and help with the care.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot
Yeah.
because my wife was also teaching our children English.
Yep.
Our oldest daughter, who was the baby when we went on the ship, started in the Chinese school. And she would go to Chinese school in the morning. I'd take her at 7:30 on the motorcycle. And then I'd pick her up at noon and bring her home, and she'd study English in the afternoon. So she went to school from 7:30 in the morning till almost 10 o'clock at night, trying to study the Chinese language. And we said, honey, you're going to have to decide. Do you want to keep studying in the Chinese school, or do you want to study in the American school? And she said, I can't make the decision. And we said, well, because we'll be going back to America, it probably would be better if you could speak the English language and study.
Yeah.
And you can learn the Chinese with the children here at home.
Uh-huh.
So we stopped her Chinese study. We probably would do that differently now.
Okay.
No.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then over your time period, I know that you had some like financial difficulties at the orphanage. There's a story about gold coins. I wanted to ask you about that.
Well, we had a man, the same man actually, who had given us the land. When he passed away, his children brought out to the home all of the idols that they had that we could sell for money.
Yeah.
Well, we did not feel right about doing that. So I took them up to the mountain. At the mountain, at that time, they were fixing the road, and they dug a big pit. So I put them there and covered them up with gravel, and then they're buried somewhere up there in the mountains. But at that time, somebody came and gave us some gold coins, and we could take those into the jeweler and get the money that was needed for the home.
Mhm.
So each time, sometimes the children needed food,
Yeah.
and sometimes they needed some money at school that they had. It seemed like just when the time came, someone once said, God is never late, but he's never early either.
Mm-hmm.
He helps us to keep trusting him
Mm-hmm.
that he's going to take care of us. And he always has.
Yeah.
And you can look at how fat I am today and know that I'm okay. The Lord has always provided. And again, that money, I don't remember exactly what you're asking about,
that's
the gold
okay.
coins, how we use all the money.
Yeah.
But I know we tried to use it always for the children
Yeah. Yeah.
and do what was best or what they needed
That's good.
that we
That's
had.
the main thing.
children.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask as well around this, when did the adoption part come into play? So I know that you said initially you had a couple of children, like very quickly, a couple of weeks you had 18 children. When did you start to get inquiries or the ideas of adoption start?
Well, once again, we've never advertised
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
We just prayed. And the very first child that we took on June the 13th, 1975, was available for adoption.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had not even thought about this angle of doing work with children.
Mm.
And a family who was stationed in Taiwan wanted to adopt that child.
Mm-hmm.
So another missionary who had adoptions, Lillian Dixon, with Mustard Seed in Taipei, sent her social worker to help me through that first adoption.
Mm.
And after that, we began to get children who were available for adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And each time we had a child available, God provided someone to adopt them.
Mm-hmm.
And the amazing thing is that we have never charged anything for an adoption,
Mm-hmm.
never ever charged the adoptive family anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, God always provided to take care of our needs financially.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is that these families would not necessarily be wealthy families,
Yeah.
but they would be Christian families who loved the Lord and wanted to raise their child in a Christian home.
Mm-hmm.
And always, when we had a child available, just the right family was available to adopt that child.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time we finished foreign adoptions, I think we had 476.
Wow.
And some had gone to Malaysia.
Wow.
And to Singapore and to Norway and Sweden and Holland and Germany and America.
Yeah.
So
I was surprised. None of them were in Australia.
One family moved to Australia, but we have tried later. The Australian laws are very difficult.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes, I was going to
Very
say
difficult.
that would be. Yeah, adoption's very expensive and very complicated in Australia. To say the least. To give you some kind of background, for example, Aboriginal people in Australia, there's a big history with colonization and white people coming to Australia, and then we had different policies to try to help Aboriginal people. And at the time, the government thought they were doing the right thing, but then we had this thing called the Stolen Generation in the 60s, where basically the government was trying to take Aboriginal people from their homes in order to try to culturalize them into a white society. And then that didn't work out very well. And then they were considered a generation that was stolen. So fast forward to the present day, the government's always been involved to try to help in terms of a child protection angle to help children that were, with parents that might have drug problems or alcohol problems or mental health or be in very precarious situations. So the government would get involved and take these children from the home. And then the argument from Aboriginal people is that this stolen generation, this stolen culture is continuing on. So what Australia did is that they had this different incentive where they're trying to put children back to their birth family now. A lot of it's all about taking them from their homes to make sure it's safe, but then restoring them back to their original family. Now, what happened with adoption is that it used to be a lot more open, but then now they changed it where in order for an Aboriginal child to be adopted by someone that's not Aboriginal, they need to make sure they've checked with every single person in their family. They check with anyone in the community that would take them, that they've exhausted all these cultural ties. And if that is all not happening, then they can go with someone that isn't Aboriginal, but they still need to maintain all these cultural connections, So it's a very, you can understand why it's so complicated and adoption such a lot of red tape with different things that come through,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even in Taiwan, one of the reasons that they started making the laws a little more strict than when we started the adoption process in 1975 is because sometimes people would take their children to the market in a stroller and they'd turn around to pay for their food and their child was gone.
Someone was stealing them.
And they began to stealing them and selling them, and they began to find these children would pop up in Australia, in New Zealand, and in other countries besides Taiwan. And so then they started making the laws a little more strict for
adoption. Was it foreigners that were stealing them?
Somebody within the country of Taiwan was stealing children to make money, selling them.
Okay.
Yes, and that was sickening. But when we first started adoption in 1975, all we had to do was to go to a Gongzhengren, which is like a notary public, and signify that this family wanted to adopt and this family wanted to give the child up, and he would chop it, and that was it.
And away you go.
Very gentle and very simple. But then later it got much more complicated.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about these things. Like one thing I wanted to bring up is what you mentioned before, Ted, about like East versus West, and this goes back to international adoption, right? Like in a Western culture, as you know, like when the kids grow up, the kids with a family, the kids grow up and then they're off their own, they're on their own adventure, But in Eastern culture, the children, the older family looks after the younger children, and then the younger children grow up and then they look after their family, and this continues this cycle, yeah? So this is like the Eastern culture versus the Western culture when it comes to raising a family. So my question to you is, how did that change with having international adoptions and like getting people in the community of Taiwan to adopt children that they think might be undesirable for their own needs or their own ideas about what they wanted for a family?
When we first began adoptions in 1975, I would say that the Chinese concept of adoption was a poor concept. They considered an adopted child to be more like a servant. And and they even have a saying in Chinese, you adopt one to get one, that if you would adopt a child, then you would be able to have one physically, biologically.
Oh, right.
And that has often proved true. That's true, but doesn't always happen that way. But nonetheless, be that as it may, we began to realize that the older people, the grandparents, were not necessarily as accepting of an adopted child as the parents might have been. And so we began to question then not just the people that wanted to adopt, but how do your parents feel about adoption? What are they? Can they answer these questions and tell us a little bit about adoption? And so we began. You learn a lot of things when you start into something. We did not know. We did not know that people had that kind of a concept, but we began to learn rapidly that we needed to investigate not just how the parents would feel, but
Yeah.
how would the grandparents or how would the extended family look at an adopted child.
Well, this is like in Australia, like to adopt a child currently, is I think it's like a 3-4 year process of vetting of everyone's family, the grandparents, everyone, psychology profiles, children's checks, going to a judge. They have to review the case independently. There has to be a psychologist to independently meet with the birth family, or if they're involved. There's so much knowledge and decisions and thoughts and documentation. Like you're in a situation where you're like, okay, we have so many children, they don't have anywhere to go. No one wants these children. How can we help? Like I get from your perspective, it would have been so difficult to navigate, and you're probably learning as you go. Like you said, you're learning quickly about, hang on, they're not really looking to look after these children. They're really just seeing them as a servant, for a family.
And if I had known as much then as I know now, I would have done some things differently. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This also was the 70s. Like all the advice and psychology and, like I worked in child protection and helping children in these situations. And like I went to university, I got a degree in psychology. I used to work in children's refuges with children that had severe problems with drugs, alcohol, violence. These are children that were tortured and sexually abused, and the outcomes of those things, and then learning how those things happen. As someone that's had all this education about the modern things, and then I had my own journey of going, oh, we should never put these people back with their family. Oh, maybe we should actually always take them away. But over a long period of time, seeing, I had children that were like 13, then grew up to 18, or children that were 18, and then seeing them at 25, seeing how they needed that connection to their family was the right thing to do. And then other circumstances, Ted, they should have never been back with their family at all. It was always the best move for them to move on, So this is, for me, was someone with all this teams of psychologists, psychiatrists, and government funding, billions of dollars I'm talking about in these sort of projects, and being a social worker in that environment.
Right.
But, what can you do, Ted? Like you're making the best decision that you can make with everything around you and who's going to help you,
And there was a time, even in the last few years, where the government wanted to put the children back in their birth families.
Okay. I was curious about this.
But it didn't work in most of the cases,
Yeah.
especially if it was an unwed mother, and maybe now she's married and the man didn't even know she'd had a baby. That didn't work. There were just a lot of extenuating circumstances.
Is there funding involved for these people from the government?
Well, that's what they decided, that it wasn't working. First of all,
you need to provide.
They would say
money.
common. Yeah, money.
Yeah, you need money.
And there is a scripture that says, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
Mm-hmm.
And when people really love money, they'll do a lot of things that you would think, surely they wouldn't sell their own child. Surely they wouldn't, be deceptive about this, but they are willing to do that just for money. So,
it's terrible.
And we had to be very careful. When we took a child, we always took that we did not pay anything for a child. We never paid any money for a child. So if people came to us and said, we want to give our child for adoption, we made it very clear that we did not pay for that child.
Yeah.
and they signed a paper that we had not paid, so we could prove to the government that we were not making money on these children.
Yeah.
When they
Yeah. Is that because of people actually who were stealing children and selling them to people who wanted them?
Yes, that's one of the reasons that they came to do that.
Hmm.
So,
Was the government thinking that you, at some point, were making money off this
well,
as well?
they thought
Personally?
then after that, after we paid,
Yeah.
they would say, "Oh, you paid so much for a child. How much did you charge the people to get that child?"
Uh huh.
And so we never ever charged
Yes.
for an adoption ever.
Yes.
And amazingly, some of our families that adopted from us said, "Oh, it was so easy and so inexpensive to adopt from you in Taiwan.
Mm.
But we've adopted from mainland China and it's cost thousands of dollars
Mm.
for us."
It's a business.
So, yeah, just a big expense.
Mm.
Well, I can understand that but even when we were doing adoptions, we never usually had to pay more than $300 to accomplish a complete adoption.
Yeah.
All of the paperwork
Yeah.
and everything. And that was just our expense.
Uh huh.
But we never told that to the people.
Yeah.
And we never charged them
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Because our objective was that the child could have a good Christian home and they wouldn't have to pay an arm and a leg to get that child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would be able to raise the child.
This is internationally you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Internationally.
Hmm.
And that was same. We had a couple of families adopt in Taiwan, but we didn't charge them.
Mm.
We didn't charge them anything.
Mhm.
It was just our joy to be able to see a child placed in a good home.
Mm. And
That was our purpose.
how did you deal with the difficulty of having children that did have problems like mental health or different diagnoses? People that didn't want to adopt children like that. How did you overcome that difficulty?
That was one of the problems, and has been one of the problems of finding people in Taiwan to adopt, is because if the parents have been on drugs or alcohol related
Neonatal
problems
problems.
of
Yeah.
some kind,
Yeah.
they're afraid
Yeah.
of taking that type of child.
Yeah.
And also they're afraid that the child will grow up and know their birth family and go back into that
Mm.
kind of situation.
Mhm.
So that has been one of the requests that we've had. We've had a couple of children that have gone out since the government said we could no longer do international adoptions in the home there. But we've gone through another organization in Taipei that could still do an international adoption because the child's background was such that it was almost impossible to find.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just, and another special case was
Yeah.
we had a boy in the home that was an Aborigine boy.
Yeah.
And he had stopped breathing when I was caring for him.
Mm.
But he was in a bed asleep. I wasn't standing over him. I had no idea how long he had not breathed. When I picked him up, he was not breathing. And then I picked him up and, just gave him some stimulation. He started breathing. So when it came to adopt him, we told the adoptive family he had stopped breathing. I have no idea. He was meeting all of his markers for development.
Yes.
So I wasn't worried, but I said, this has happened. So you're going to have to watch for it. It ended up that he was adopted to Joplin, Missouri, here in the United States, where we are.
Yeah.
And our son, Brad, was hospitalized. And our son, Brad, coded. He did eventually die a few days later. But the nurse who was taking care on duty of our son that night was that young man, which was a baby boy in Taiwan that had stopped breathing. And so he had no ill effects. He'd become a male nurse.
Wow.
And how God used that as such an encouragement to us in our lives for him to have been there
Wow.
when Brad coded. So, God is just Oh, he's so terrific. So,
is
thank you,
this
God.
who's Brad? Sorry.
Brad is our son, our youngest child that just passed away a couple of years ago due to alcohol.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is that who
So-
is that who you were spreading the ashes for?
That is absolutely right, my dear boy.
Okay.
That's right. And so, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so just to clarify, he went to hospital in Missouri, and then the nurse was the adopted
Grown up
baby.
that we had in Taiwan
Wow.
that's an adult now, and that he's the nurse, and he's the nurse on duty.
Wow.
He was the one that my wife picked up and wasn't breathing.
Wow. Wow.
And-
Wow. Wow. That's amazing.
And then he
It's-
was adopted
It's
here.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
And then he became a nurse.
Wow.
And he was the very one who took care of our son when he coded
That's-
in the hospital.
That's full
Which meant he
circle.
had no mental problems due to not breathing.
Yeah. Well, 100%. He wouldn't. He wouldn't to be a fully
Yeah.
functioning nurse
It's a
and do all
miracle.
those things. So that's really the full circle. You help someone, and then they helps your family. Totally
Yes.
unrelated.
Yes, it's
Wow.
yeah, just so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is your youngest son?
Yes. He was our baby. He was
Mhm.
almost 40.
Yeah.
His name was Brad, but we said we should have named him Brett. He was quite the guy.
Was he?
We love Brad a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's how we met. So we were in Hualien, and then we're trying to go through an area to go to Takura Gorge, and then which is like the east coast of.
We're just chatting as we're waiting.
Yeah, well, we're waiting, and what happened there was that we went there the day before, and they said there was a rock on the road, and we couldn't pass through this bridge that was about this big to go through, and then there was a mountain around on the other side, and we went there the day prior, and we spoke to them, and then we had to use Google Translate like we were talking about before, and the woman's like, "No, there's a rock. We need to clear the rock. Come back tomorrow at this time." I'm like, okay, so we came back the next day. And then she was there again. And I was talking to her for a while and dialoguing before you turned up. And then I said, "I've been here yesterday. Do you remember me?" She's like, "I have no idea who you are." So that many people have spoken to her. Me and another tall white guy would stick out so easily. All the people that would come and speak to her. She had no idea who we were. And then I said to my friend, "I'm going to go to the bathroom," because we were there for a long time. And I went to the jungle. And then I was like, "I reckon I can run around." So that's what I did. I ran. The bridge was here. I ran all the way around, and they were not happy I did that, but I ran around, and there was just some people in like a truck just smoking, just like, "Hey, going?" And then I ran through the back of the mountain. There was no rock. They said, "You're going to have to wait 2 or 3 hours to go through." The woman was like, "Couldn't believe I did that." And I was like, and then I said, "Come on, there's nothing there. You guys are just," basically they were there just to pretend to work. That's what they were doing. So that's what I did. And then I said, "My friend, you should go do it as well. We're still waiting another 40 minutes. My friend ran around and did the same thing. And the woman was like, "He can't do this." I'm like, "There's nothing going on there." So we're a bit naughty. We went and did this little adventure. But then that gave us time because I got to meet you. And then you were telling me about like spreading the ashes. So can you just share, Bev, what was your intentions? Because he grew up with all of you guys, right, in Taiwan. And is this somewhere he liked?
He was born there.
Okay. So then you just wanted to spread his ashes in the places that he loved to be?
Yeah.
Well, actually, when he passed away,
Yeah.
we had his ashes divided into 3 parts. One part is buried right here, about 5 minutes from our
Oh,
house.
nice.
Ted passes it every day,
Yeah.
and we decided we'll be buried in the same place too.
Yeah.
And so then the
Part.
second part will be we have a grave site in Taiwan where any of the orphanage kids that have passed away.
Yeah.
That's another long story.
Okay.
But anyway, so part of Brad's ashes were put there.
Yeah.
And then third place, he loved Taroko Gorge. And
it's an
so as a
amazing
kid,
place.
as a family person, we would always just go, if we wanted to go away for a day or two, we went to Taroko Gorge.
Yeah.
So Brad loved Taroko Gorge. So then that's where that part was. Then we went on up to the top of the mountain and went to the hot springs, and that's where his ashes were spread, were
Okay.
dropped out over a big swinging bridge.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
which the government doesn't approve of. The road was closed.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So that's what you were doing. That's how we met. Okay.
Yes, that's how we met.
Got you. So, how did you come back from Taiwan to America? Like, when did you guys decide to come back, and how did that all happen?
Um, we were well, I'm 80 years old now, and my wife is 79,
Wow, you guys are doing well.
and
I thought you were about 10 years younger than that.
and so
That's awesome.
and so we feel like that they really need younger people to take over. And I know coming back to America, it's difficult to understand some of the legal jargon that we have here as well. So we're looking for someone and praying for someone
Okay.
that could do this. And my wife felt like that we'd spent all of our life in Asia taking care of other children, that it would be nice if we could come back and be with our own children and grandchildren
Yeah.
and great grandchildren
Yeah.
for a little while.
Yeah.
And so that's why we first came back for a while.
Uh-huh.
But we've been going back periodically.
Okay.
And Lord willing, we'll have to go back again next spring sometime for another inspection.
Are you? How are you?
Stepped out.
How are you able to travel so far all the time still? That's amazing. Guys can still do that. Must be
Well,
hard.
we found out this time that jet lag was a little harder on us
Yeah.
at our age than it has been in the past.
Yeah.
But so far, the Lord has provided,
Mm.
and so we'll keep trugging away.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
earlier,
yeah,
so-
you had your own mission and things, Yeah, this is the thing with making a choice. When you make one choice for one thing, the other thing is going to be a little bit less, and vice versa.
And that's
That's
life
life.
itself.
Yeah.
Life is choices.
Life is choices.
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
you're in Australia, away from your family.
Exactly.
Surely.
Exactly right. I had that. I had this exact same thought when I come back, because I was stuck in. I was living in Vietnam at the time of COVID, and I couldn't come back to Australia for a year and a half, and I came back,
Years,
and then everything had changed, and I was like, oh wow, this is what happens when you make a choice, and then
that's
in
right.
the future you return, you go, things are different, and it's like, well, if you didn't go, those
Right.
things wouldn't be the way they are. So yeah, I hear you. Now I wanted to ask you this topic in terms of adoption. So you've talked about the sacrifices you've made for your family and coming back after giving your life to this mission, right? How does that factor when you're thinking about children that are that are being adopted either internationally or domestically, leaving their birth family for a better life in a different country? Like, how do you feel about that choice? Have you seen things where that's positive and they come back, and you have to see things that are being potentially negative and they come back?
I would like to speak to that first.
Yeah.
3 of our grandchildren are adopted from the Home of God's Love. Our oldest son and his wife adopted a brother and sister who were like 10 and 11 when they were adopted out.
Yeah.
And they've had a harder time adjusting, but because our son spoke the Chinese language, it was much easier for them to adjust. And our second son and his wife adopted an infant, but that infant has grown up and graduated from college, married, and has a little girl. And he and his wife are going to Japan
Oh wow.
as missionaries.
Wow. Okay.
In November. They're leaving as missionaries to Japan. And he has never wanted to meet his birth family. And we've offered, in fact, we met with the birth family when we were back in Taiwan. And we took pictures and shared ourselves again. But he has never wanted that. So each child is different. On the other hand, we have a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old who's very interested in meeting her birth mother. So we're in the process of trying to make arrangements for something like that to happen. And we did have one situation in Taiwan where the adopted child came back with her family to Taiwan to live for a little while.
Yeah.
And we helped her find her birth family. Well, her birth mother had told her husband that before she married, she had a child. And we always encourage the birth mothers to do this.
Yeah.
If there's an unwed mother, always be honest with the man that you're getting ready to marry.
Oh, no.
Well, she had.
Okay.
So that turned out very well.
Okay.
We met together. The only problem was we had to translate because the child spoke English and the family spoke
Oh,
Chinese.
okay. Yeah.
Now, that was the problem.
Yeah.
But that's all right. We sat there and translated back and forth with the family. So it worked well.
Yeah.
Well, it is a bit of a problem these days because now the government in Taiwan senses that all children should go back to their biological people. So in the beginning, when we worked with a place called the Ray of Hope Crisis Pregnancy Place in Tainan,
Yeah.
we worked with these mothers who had been involved with drugs, with crisis pregnancies,
Yeah.
with men that were maybe not husbands but were in prison. So we were always very honest in every situation, and we never felt like we were stealing babies.
Yeah.
We've
So-
also discovered that here in America that these children may want to find their biological mother, but that mother may not want to be found, and we have difficulty finding them because they may have changed their name. They don't want to be found.
Yeah.
If they don't want to be found.
And so some of these kids, as they become adults, because this was a big year of adoptions. I think around 2005 or so, we had like 35 adoptions. That was a very
That's
big
huge.
year.
That's
Usually
a lot
you
of
get
kids.
about 8.
1 year.
And so I just wrote 5 letters to adoptive families yesterday. Of the 500 adoptions, I can keep up with all but about 4 of them. And it just depends on the kid and their heart. I've got a telephone call.
Yeah, and so we find that in the States,
Yeah.
some of the kids are so happy with their adoptive families, they don't even think about
Yeah.
birth.
I guess it's more of a question later when they're fully grown. It's probably more the thing when they're like,
Yes,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I will say this for our adoptive families.
Yeah.
They've been very good to try to keep their children up on the Asian culture,
yeah.
the Taiwanese culture.
Yeah. No, you guys are doing. I can see that you're trying to do everything you kind of can to maintain the connections, and you're also having to make a tough decision about what you think is the best situation at the time. You know, as to and who's there to support them, and then later on you have to kind of look back on the choices you make either as good or oh, maybe we should have done this. It's just kind of the way the world works. I wanted to ask you as well,
Right.
Ted. Can you recall a moment where you had to make a tough decision that was a significant impact on the children that you were caring for?
Well, yes, I can. One day, an elder from the church out in the country came to our house, and he wanted to borrow money. He and his wife had 8 children, and he wanted to borrow the money. And the amount of money he wanted to borrow was exactly the money that we had in our possession at that time. I had just read in Luke chapter 6 that Jesus said, if anyone asks anything of you, give it to them.
Okay.
And I said, Lord, if I give this money to them, I need to buy rice and vegetables and meat for the children today. I need to pay the electric bill. And that's all the money we have.
It was like $75 then.
So I said to Mr. Chun, okay, just a moment. And I started up the stairs to get the money. And I said, Lord, this doesn't make sense. So I came back down the stairs to tell Mr. Chun I couldn't. But then that reminded me of that scripture. If anybody asks anything of you, give it to him. So I made about 15 trips up and down the stairs, back and forth, arguing with the Lord that it didn't make sense. And finally I said, okay, I'll do it. So I went and got the money. I gave it to Brother Chun, and he went out the door. He was very happy. And I thought, oh, you dumb dummy, what have you done? And that day, somebody brought rice and vegetables and meat and just enough money to pay the electric bill. And so everything was taken care of.
Wow. What
We didn't have to worry about anything.
what did he need the
So
money for? Do you think?
it's
I
some,
thought I thought he was buying a motorcycle.
the point I was
Did
just
you?
trying to do what God wanted me to do,
Yeah.
but I was also trying to think about the children
And
and what we needed.
yeah. That's a tough decision, especially after you've read something that's influencing you to think, oh, I need to do this, versus feeding hungry
And
children.
he had not asked me, I would have been against
Yeah.
it, but it was the right answer.
Yeah.
God has done that over and over and over and over in 50 years.
Wow.
And you know something else that's amazing about that story is
Yeah.
Brother John left, and he was very happy about borrowing that money. And then later he was killed in a motorcycle accident. A taxi hit him, and
Yeah.
he was killed. And it wasn't until after his death that his daughter came to our home one day and said, I know that my father borrowed some money from you, and I want to give you this money. I can't pay it all back, but I can give you part of it. And the money that she gave us that day was just what we needed for the expenses of that
wow.
day.
It's another full circle thing, just like we spoke about before.
Yeah, again,
It is.
God took care of us.
I have a question for you as well about support and maintaining your own well-being while caring for these children and all the, terrible stories and lives they've had. How did you guys support each other? I know you had like a network of people that were also in the same realm of things that you were doing, but how did you support each other and maintain your own well-being while caring for children that were going through all these difficult problems?
Well, my wife says it's a good thing both of us didn't want to go home on the same day, because if she was down, I was up, and if I was down, she was up.
Oh, that's good.
So that's
a balance, isn't it? It's like a seesaw.
Yeah. Balance.
Yeah.
And you know something else? Our children, our grown children, have said to us, "We are so thankful to be raised in a foreign country
Really?
and have experience in learning another language."
Yeah.
And being able to deal with a different culture, because we found that so many young people in America only are concerned about what's going on right here.
Yeah, that's been my perception of America
They don't
generally.
have a vision that there's a world out there of other people that might need help.
That's true.
And we're so thankful to have been raised in a foreign culture.
Yeah, you have a different mission, different background, upbringing, and then you're in a foreign place. So I can totally relate with you.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about that as well. Like the cultural norms and the societal norms can be like a barrier to the work that you were doing. Can you tell me a story of a child whose life was significantly impacted by a mission, and maybe witnessing that gave you more inspiration and motivation to keep going?
I have two stories. One is a young man that came to us. He was from a family of 6 or 7. The father had been very badly burned in a mountain fire. The mother had terrific headaches. So we took the kids, but they were wonderful Christian folks, and they didn't want to give up their kids. They just needed help.
Yeah.
And so we took 5 of their kids at one time. And the mother said, I'm used to having a bunch of kids around. Can I take some of them back home? I said, they're your kids. Of course you can take them back home. But 3 of the kids stayed with us a longer period of time. Now, one of the kids will probably be the head of our board. He's just a retired policeman, not ready for him to be that old. Wow. He's remained a very strong Christian. He has great morals, and it's been great to watch him grow and mature and now become a grandfather himself.
Wow. The reality is, when you tell people that don't know anything about this topic, they just think, oh, it's the child and it's all about them and their specific situation. But really, like, there's a whole family and a multitude of different problems that arise from their own lives to come to the situation. You don't know the whole story, and then you get to learn more, and then most of the time it makes sense. Not people make decisions. Maybe they're selfish, or maybe they're the wrong thing, or maybe they're out of their control. There's so many different factors, and
That's right.
and they have a conscience too. Most people have a conscience about the decisions they make in life, and they realize perhaps later in their life that they've made a mistake, or they're trying to repair or trying to work through something. And I can see on the other side, a child that's been abandoned, they might not want anything to do with them as well, So it's complicated.
Yeah, there's a lot of facets to it.
It is.
Yes.
It's very complicated. It's a decision you have to kind of make, and I think you're doing the right thing in terms of just respecting what the child and who's grown up wants to do around that decision.
Mm-hmm.
So
Say, Kane,
Well, actually, it has been such a joy and a blessing
yeah,
to be involved in so many people's lives for so many years. God has been so good to us.
yeah,
And we want to praise the Lord for that.
yeah. And looking back on all the your time as missionaries in Taiwan, what would you say is your most significant achievement, and how did you overcome all the problems along the way, do you think?
well, I would say the fact that he could take two kids from poor backgrounds and give us something to do that made us feel like we were helpful
Yeah.
to others has been a privilege.
Mhm.
And achievement.
You have one crisis after another because, working in foster care, it's a daily crisis.
Yeah.
You never know. You think, can it get any worse? And it does.
Yeah.
But God has always been faithful, and decision making. We've always trusted in God. In our early years of adoptions, we had a co-worker named Anna Flesher that's still at the home and doing a lot of the work, most of the work actually.
Yeah.
So as we had these, it was Ted and myself and Anna really praying, God, who do you want this child to go to? It's a big deal. It's not something you take lightly.
Yeah.
But when we got more involved with the government and they had more control over us, that was not okay with them.
Yeah.
That wasn't a good decision making. So then we have to have a board and all these things.
Mhm.
So I really feel like in most of our cases, our seeing these kids being put in good Christian homes has been such a blessing.
Yeah.
We had a case a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And so we have this board we have to go through, and they have to approve these people to become adoptive parents. Well, after that's done, we can allocate any child that we choose is right for them. But for this particular situation, the time we first met these people personally, there had been a terrific train accident in Taiwan, very near our home. And this family lived very near the railroad tracks in the town of Su'ao. So they have on your watches and things, government notifications, there's been this train wreck and da-da-da-da. So this was a church, and these people right near exactly where this happened, they went out and they had been up until 3:00 in the morning helping these people who had been in this train wreck. It was a terrible thing.
It's terrible.
And then we had a meeting with them that same day to be introduced to them as adoptive parents. Well, if you only knew what they'd been doing until they came to your house, you're all going to think they're pretty special people, which they were.
Yeah.
So then they were applying to adopt, and when it came to this governing board, the governing board said, their BMI is a little high. They're both heavyset folks, and we have doctors, lawyers, merchant chiefs on that particular board.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, they're really not taking care of their health. I think they're using too much oil. Someone else said, they should lose 10 pounds before you give them a child. They really couldn't keep after a child. So I just listened to this. I couldn't say I was fuming, but I was very upset.
Yeah.
And finally I said, we've been doing this ministry for a good many years, and we have had some extremely heavy-set people. We don't pay attention to BMI. We do need a health from a doctor that they think, their heart's okay and that sort of thing. So we've been doing this. I think we're in English, we say we're barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
I think you've got the emphasis, not will they be good parents, but physically they can last till the person dies or something. So I said, I just think, I said, I've tried to lose weight for a good many years. 10 pounds doesn't come off all that easily. And I said, you would be denying this family the privilege of that time with that child while you're having these crazy restrictions.
Yeah.
So they passed on those people.
What?
They've been wonderful parents. They probably still eat too much oil. I don't know.
So they passed on them. They said they couldn't have kids.
They did pass them, yes. And then they've adopted a second child. They have from the Home of God's Love. And it's just, we ran into them at a bazaar while we were there this summer, and just such a joy to see
I can
these
imagine.
folks and what they are.
Yeah.
It is just worth $1 million now.
Well, it's amazing the work that you guys have done. You've had 2,200 kids in your home. You've done over 500 adoptions. It's a testament to, you're dedicating your life to a mission, and you did it. You've completed the whole thing, and you've gone through ups and downs, and you're still resilient, and you're 80 years old, and you're still going back and still influencing this. It's quite an achievement. It's quite an achievement and amazing what you guys have done.
I want to tell you one last story is that after we saw you, a guy that was about 40 years old was out near our house. He lived in a village, a mountain village, probably about 20 minutes away from us.
Yeah.
But he'd never been to our house. And our coworker, Anna, was taking a walk. And I don't know why this conversation happened, but he said, I used to live in the Home of God's Love. Well, she said, just come in and see. Come in and say hello or something.
Yeah.
So she brought him in. He knew where we were, and he passed us, but he never had the nerve to come in and see us. So this was around 40 years ago. He came in, he says, I lived here for a short while. He said, his whole story. He is a Christian. He's still going to church. I don't think he's married. As a Christian, we're just trying to be constant. Mm-hmm. That's just, we're just trying to be faithful and constant in whatever we're doing. And you don't know who's watching you, and you don't know the influence that you have. Mm. But even though maybe it wasn't much, God can multiply it. He's a great multiplier. His math is terrific. Mm-hmm. And so we've been a part of that.
I also would like to add that of those 2,200 children, the 500 adoptions are in addition to. So that's like 2,700 children.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if you
No, I got that. 2,200 children that you've actually cared for in your home, and 500 that have been successfully adopted on top of that. Yeah, that's amazing. Like I said, you've, for two people to impact 3,000 lives is amazing. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all your stories and being candid. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
If you're listening to this, you've reached the end of the episode. And I just want to take the time to thank you and appreciate you for listening to the entire thing. Here at the Mastered Podcast, we're focused on improving and being one of the best podcasts in the game. So what we're asking our listeners is to leave a comment or any other feedback about what you thought was okay, what you thought was good, or what you thought was great. As well as that, if you think there are any other guests we might like to feature on the show, please contact me on Instagram or send me an email. If you like the show, please recommend it to some of your friends and family or anyone else. So, thanks again for listening to the show, and we'll catch you next time.